I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to the public open house that we're going to hold for the Lake Stevens Civic Center. My name is Russ Wright. I'm the Community Development Director at Lake Stevens, and I've been the project manager for this project. The city and Snow Isle Libraries have been working together for quite some time on siting a new facility. Earlier this year, we engaged the Stowe Group to help us out. They brought with them a great team of consultants. As you see on the screen, Miller Hull, Leland Consulting, Main Street, Studio, I can't read it, 983, SiteWorks, Herrera, and GenCap. So we've been really lucky to work with this group over the last several months. Up to this point, the group has been working on an economic forecast of the area. We've looked at some conceptual site designs. They've provided needs assessments for both the city and the library as they continue to grow and the city continues to grow. And so tonight we just want to share some of the work that they've produced over the last few months with the community, get your feedback on possible City Hall library joined site. There are three alternatives that you'll explore, and they'll be talking about some of the funding mechanisms that we've also been discussing. So with that, I'll hand it over to Bob Stowe, and he can introduce his team or they can introduce themselves. Thanks, Bob.
Great. Thank you very much, Russ, and good evening. And thanks for creating this opportunity to present to the Lake Stevens community the concepts that we've been developing for the potential of a civic center, including the City Hall Library and Sewer District Administrative Offices. As a former resident of Lake Stevens, I know how beautiful and special the place you all call home is. And so our work carries with it a really high level of importance to make sure we achieve your expectations. And Russ identified the team that's going to be presenting the concepts for a potential civic center here at Chapel Hill. So thank you for Russ for doing that. Claire, if you could advance to the next slide, please. Our agenda tonight consists of a very brief overview of the scope, schedule, and the progress that we have made to date, really to provide some context and background for the primary purpose for tonight is sharing with you our preliminary concepts and costs and finishing up with next steps and of course answering any questions, any and all questions that you may have tonight. Next slide, Claire. Our scope can be illustrated best in these five elements, and Russ had mentioned many, if not all of them. First is the market analysis of the development opportunity that may exist if private development were to also locate on the site with the city and the library to reduce costs and to help create more activity, as well as a placemaking opportunities that provide amenities to those who visit the City Hall, the Sewer District offices, and the library. And one of all alternatives, you will see tonight that we've placed all the civic functions on one parcel. And the other parcel, in this case, the parcel owned by the library, can be reserved for private development. This could be for a commercial development, a cafe, a coffee shop, or some other placemaking type of development. Or it could include multifamily residential development, which we believe will deliver the highest value that then could help support civic costs. Based on the development up to the site, we believe that the market value would be approximately $900,000 for a multifamily development on one of the parcels, the library parcel. There's also opportunities to lease space inside the civic facility, such as a coffee shop, a cafe, or another community amenity, potentially up to 1,500 square feet that may not be immediately needed for public use, but space that's included in the facility that is built now to support future growth. We have refined the current needs assessment for the City Hall, including the administrative space for the Lake Stevens Sewer District, and completed a needs assessment for the library. And it's those needs assessments which were very important as we developed the various site concepts that you're going to be seeing in just a few moments. We've also comprehensively evaluated the public-private partnership opportunities, or what might be called P3 opportunities, to create the best development at the lowest possible cost, which includes evaluation of private development, joining the project in some fashion. Again, either by purchase and development of land that I mentioned, or the lease of space inside the facility that's not immediately needed, as well as the project delivery approach. to obtain the best facility at the lowest possible cost. And you'll hear more about delivery approaches later in the presentation. Public engagement is a key for any civic project. And the reason for this community forum here tonight, as well as our second public survey, which will be available after tonight's presentation, that's related to those various concepts. The final element of the scope are the alternatives and the concepts designs themselves. And again, these illustrate 3 distinctively different site concepts that we will be seeking your feedback on. 2 of the site concepts take advantage of shared building space opportunities, and all take advantage of shared site development opportunities such as stormwater and parking facilities to lower the public cost of those facilities. Could you advance to the next slide, please? This is our schedule. We've been working on this project since early September of last year, and we're about 2/3 completed with the concept, or what you might call the evaluation phase of the Lake Stephen Civic Center project. Tonight, we're going to be revealing the preliminary concepts, and we'll be seeking community input as well as input from the various agencies in April. That will lead then to a preferred concept identified and further refined during the month of May, with final presentation in mid to late June of this year. There's a lot more work to take the concept designs through the various design phases, leading to construction of a facility, including the very important decision about how the project is supported financially, as there's been no decisions been made about how this project is to be funded. And that will be an important element for all the agencies to decide after our initial work is completed. Next slide. This slide shows the progress that we have made to date on the key items, including the market analysis, the demographic analysis, the needs assessments, the public-private partnership opportunities, our first public engagement opportunity, our first public agency presentation, as well as the preliminary concepts that we're revealing this evening. And our future task, and of course we have some things that are in progress, which include all of the reports and background information that is supporting the information you're receiving here this evening. This current presentation, we're currently involved with the conceptual utility plan and environmental review, and then our future task that we'll talk more about at the end of the presentation. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mike, who's going to describe some very important public input that we received to date.
Thanks, Bob. I'm Mike Jobs. I'm the design principal from the Miller-Hull Partnership. We're the architects, and I, along with Claire Renhack, who's on the call as well, are leading the architecture team. We're working directly with Site Workshop, a great landscape architecture firm we've worked with on many civic projects like this, public projects. They're really good at that kind of work. So I'll be co-presenting along with Emily Van Geldern from Site Workshop tonight. This is a great summary. I think you're all familiar maybe with the word cloud concept, but really captured the big, most used words from the public survey. We were really pleased to get a really big turnout for that survey, unexpectedly high compared to what we're used to getting. So you can tell there's an active participation from the community already, and a lot of people really care about this project, and we really saw that come through in this survey. But these are a few word clouds that kind of capture the biggest concepts that came out of it. First here, this slide is about the building design. And I love how the biggest words in the middle were Pacific Northwest character. We love that term because I think it's a great term for bridging that common gap between attractive historic building and modernist design. Rustic industrial, all those things really can be blended into something that's considered Pacific Northwest character. And our firm's been doing Pacific Northwest buildings, public buildings, for over 44 years. And we really love that term. So having it come out in this survey was really exciting, and I think right on the nose. We heard a lot about the site design as well from everybody, and there were some great terms there too: local to Lake Stevens, native planting, green space, outdoor play for children, rainwater being pointed out and celebrated, trees, water features. All of these things are concepts that are really kind of germane to what we're going to show you next and how we're trying to really honor this site. And then the library vision It's so great to have a library located next to a civic center. Those two really can work together and really make this the place to be, the center, the civic heart of Lake Stevens. So a lot of these great terms were here. I think a really important one is outdoor space. That we're kind of in a COVID, entering into a post-COVID phase. We all understand the importance of that now. Being able to host community events, messy and loud activities, great community hub gathering spaces, and flexibility for the future. So we put together some images of projects that we think capture some of these the spirit of what we heard. These are public projects that most of them we've worked on. A lot of people on this team have worked on some of these. Right there on the upper left is great outdoor spaces for community gatherings. So this is a place to go for a big public event. Indoor, outdoor, 4-season spaces, if possible. A real welcoming, community scaled building, human scaled building, not a big grand gesture that's sort of overly expensive and off-putting, but something that really welcomes people in a variety of ways throughout the day. A variety of ages being welcomed here, kids, all the way up through the spectrum of ages, being able to gather here safely and feel welcome here. We're talking about creating a very healthy site. So we'll look at the site here in a minute, but what a beautiful site you have. Lake Stevens is well known as a completely beautiful green community. And we want to really dial these civic spaces into that natural site and make it part of that natural edge over there, the green edge on this site, while still being a really civic space. We think we can bridge the gap between those two what seemingly are opposing concepts. We think we can really blend them here. And then finally, before I turn it over to Emily for a minute, how can we really open these buildings up, the library, the Civic Center, City Hall, for really 4-season use, at least into the shoulder seasons, into the fall and spring? How can we be outside under cover and enjoy that Pacific Northwest outdoors by having some big openings, as big as possible, to really spill out onto the outdoor plaza spaces? So we're really going to be locating some public plaza spaces right adjacent to some of the key public spaces on the inside, so that we can mix the indoor outdoor use of the project. And then we really spend a lot of time trying to put the right spaces right next to each other so that they can open onto each other where possible. So if we have a big meeting room for the library, we're considering the kind of the hearth room, we're calling it, or the council chambers for the city hall, if those could be located next to each other or even completely shared in some scenarios, they could open onto each other and expand for the 1 or 2 gigantic events each year, but then size down and be right sized for the typical events that happen all the time. So we look for ways to really open spaces up. Here's an example in a city hall where the council chambers opened onto a covered breezeway, and we were able to pull the doors, the glass doors fully open, and with speakers relaying the sound, we were able to expand the space of an additional 1/3 of the capacity for those big events. And then finally, like Bob said, we're contemplating the potential to include a small neighborhood cafe in some of the growth space. That's something we're looking into and seeing if it's something that can be funded initially to really activate this space. So these are some examples of how you can really dial in a little community cafe inside of a public space, indoors and outdoors. Now, Emily's going to talk some more about the outdoor public spaces.
Hi, I'm Emily Van Gelderen with Site Workshop, and Clayton Bodwin's also on this call, and we are your landscape architects. So the public space, outdoor space, is a continuation of what's going on inside of the building, with spaces available for both large and small gatherings that are both civic and educational, with opportunities to be playful where these two characters overlap. So we're looking to increase the tree canopy throughout the site and create moments of pause while also pairing the site's existing hydrology and geology with the pedestrian experience. Next slide. So we're really excited about the idea of weaving storytelling opportunities throughout the site, whether it's through materials or signage, art, or seasonal events, with the overall goal of the site being an available resource to the community year-round. So we also hope to connect the outdoor space with the buildings, like Mike said, so that for certain public programs or events, people could spill out from the building to the landscape seamlessly. Next slide. So with the site's adjacency to an existing wetland, which we'll go into more detail a little bit later, and its proximity to the lake, as you all know, we're really interested in creating stormwater amenities or features that are visible, artful, educational, and seasonal. So there's an existing stormwater detention vault on site that Mike will also highlight later in the presentation. And we plan to place these visible stormwater amenities strategically throughout the site in order to help reduce the stress on this existing vault, which will help with cost savings for the project in the future. Next slide. So as you'll see, because a lot of our site strategy is to limit impacts to this existing wetland, we're interested in this idea of weaving circulation paired with pause points that offer opportunity for play or learning for all ages throughout the landscape and throughout the year. Next.
I think that's a really important concept Emily pointed out about the site being a resource to the community. And I think even beyond needing to come to the city to do business or come to the library, it's a place for people to gather regardless of those two spaces. They can come here anytime. It's a great place to meet people throughout the day and use it even if you're not going to need to go inside to either one of the buildings. And you know, the site you chose here is in a really advantageous spot. It's really holding down the west side of the lake. Got a great gathering space over there on the east side. And this is really the great civic gathering space on the west side. It's just at the great spot coming off of Highway 9 where things start to slow down. You can really kind of sense that tree canopy coming back as you head toward the lake. So these are some sketches we did early on when we were first actually interviewing for the project, kind of think it through and look at the position of this site in the greater context. So how can this site be a gathering space on the west side that really blends that Highway 9 and center of town feel and eventually kind of link down to the lake? How can we kind of be at the cusp of those two and really become the center that sort of sews those two together? And the sketch on the bottom there is kind of an idea of healing that tree canopy across the site again. It's been kind of removed at some point. How can we really bring that tree canopy right back across and sort of blend between civic and forest? This next sketch kind of shows that concept. So how can we enhance that woodland? We've got a really good category 2 wetland on the site there. It's kind of a great little piece of nature tucked onto the west side of the site there. We're required to enhance that and to protect it, and in some cases enhance it. And how can we take that opportunity and really grow that woodland across the site a little bit more, while at the same time creating a real civic presence? So we have to blend those two. From Marketplace and 99, you'll be able to see these buildings and they'll have a real strong architectural and civic presence, but they'll be couched in that woodland. So from one side of them, you'll be really tied into nature, and the other side, you'll have the sense of being in the middle of town, and always being aware of how close we are to the lake and how we can maybe reach out at the upper levels of these buildings and even potentially get some views over the lake and out to the Cascades. Here are the site constraints kind of summarized. The blue line on the left is the edge of the wetland that's been delineated most recently. So you can see it's right there, kind of hugging that west side of the site. We believe that the buffer we're going to need to really honor is about 110 feet away from that. We can build within that, especially in these disturbed areas that are painted red here where there's been some gravel put in. We can definitely build in those, but if we build into the buffer where it's still a little bit green, as long as we make up for that somewhere else on the site or mitigate that, we can do that. So we don't see that as a real constraint. We see it really as an opportunity to bring that green across and bring that civic space into the woodland at the same time. So that kind of blending. And then that big rectangle at the south edge of the site there, that's an existing stormwater vault. It's an underground concrete storage that's required to kind of treat the stormwater on site. It's already there. It's worth a lot of money the way it's been built already, and we want to reuse it. We don't want to tear it down and build another one that we'd have to do anyway. So like Emily said, we're going to try to treat as much stormwater up on top of the site where you can see it to take some of the pressure off that vault and really hopefully make its capacity work without having added any other vaults. These are some shots from the site. I think most of you are all familiar with it. As you can see back there, that nice green edge, we want to really protect that and grow it across the site as much as we can. And then there's that great glacial erratic out there. We're really kind of fascinated with that big rock, and even been considering how could it be slightly moved and placed in a really advantageous spot outside so that it really anchors your public outdoor space. So that's something we've been contemplating. And then you can see here on the lower right, that kind of gravel that was put in when the site was cleared before. That's some of the disturbed areas. So we're going to try to get as much of our new disturbed area onto that as possible to let some more of the green space happen. And there's already some pretty good infrastructure out there. We're going to try to reuse as much of it as possible to save costs. All right, so we have 3 site alternatives tonight we're going to share with you. And we wanted to make all 3 of them very distinct in some way in order to bring up a certain series of concepts that we can discuss, that you can discuss as a city. Give us your input, and then we're going to blend all the best ideas from all of them into a preferred site alternative. That's ideally how it will go. So all 3 of these have a real distinct approach to the site that all honor the wetland buffer and understand how we're going to mitigate for any impacts we have in that buffer, keep that existing vault, and then work with some of the concepts we had where we're really trying to reach into that woodland on one side of these buildings and reach out and form a real civic face on the other side. This is alternative 1, which has a really nice south-facing main entrance. So it's really readily visible from 99 or from Marketplace and 99. Great solar access to the outdoor public spaces. And it also kind of has a linking space between a 2-story city hall on the left and a 1-story library on the right. Between those is a zone that we can share some spaces, potentially a community kitchen that links between the big meeting rooms in the library and the city hall, public meeting rooms, smaller public meeting rooms. All the things can be shared to varying degrees within that zone. That's also where you would enter. So that kind of blending gasket is a big part of this concept. As you can see, this concept uses both the city parcel at the north. It's sort of the north dogleg up there, and gives us a little bit more space for public outdoor space. We've got the parking sort of linked along the south and east side, so it's easy access, uses potentially some of the existing curb cuts there if possible, and really makes in and out access and fire access really simple. But we think you won't just be looking at a parking lot when you come in here. We're going to have the ability to provide some green buffers to really kind of mask that parking from outside the site. And Emily will take you through this one.
So for all the site alternatives, the character images to the right can apply to each scheme, but the diagram to the left will highlight where potential collection of water and people could occur. So this building scheme, like Mike says, creates the opportunity for a large south-facing gathering space paired with a more intimate gathering space to the north of the building. All of the stormwater is shed, collected, and treated along the street frontage, while there are smaller moments of play and learn weaved through the wetland buffer and adjacent to the library building.
And here's all that kind of stitched together into a drawing that gives you a little bit more sense of scale and kind of texture and feel. Just to give you a sense of scale, you can see the parking stalls down there. It's double loaded parking lot. So imagine a little car in each one of those slots. The little dots kind of walking in the front door are people. So that gives you a sense of the size of this and how it kind of would feel out there on the site, maybe a little bit. Showing that glacial erratic moved over here, if that's possible, we'd love to do it. It's off the vault, so it wouldn't be crushing that vault, which is sort of the red rectangle under there. And maybe that would just anchor that corner of the public plaza and really make it kind of a permanent space, a place that really means something to the town. You can see we've kind of developed this green buffer along the south edge here. Pretty key corner at the southeast, down at the bottom right of the site, where people eventually, coming up from the lake, if we could ever get a nice pedestrian link down there sometime, that'd be the place people would be arriving from. So we want to really welcome people on that corner and give them a couple of options for entering the site from there. So maybe on the left there, a bridge over the wetland that kind of safely crosses the parking lot, a raised area so that, it's a safe crossing onto that big public plaza that can have 10 by 10 tents for farmers market or craft fairs or art fairs. You can have events out here that have nothing to do with City Hall and Library if the town so chooses. This is also a great place to meet somebody and sit out in the sun on a sunny day. Plenty of bike parking. It's a really good gathering space, and you can kind of see that learning trail going out into the nature side, the green side, giving people a chance to kind of walk out there in the woods and glimpse over into the wetland. I forgot, Claire, I'm sorry. We've sort of arranged all of these with these dials, so we can, at the end, we'll be able to compare all of them a little bit on various thoughts. One is agency partnership. So how much can the library and city partner by sharing spaces? This alternative one has a really high level of that because of that shared zone in the middle, and that the two parts of they're almost two wings of one building. This one does a really good job of being sensitive to the wetland. It is impacting small portions of the buffer, but easily those are mitigated on other parts of the site. Great exterior public space, a nice large outdoor sunny space. This one, all these cluster pretty tightly on cost. We'll see that later. This one is slightly on the higher end, just because the library is one story and the city hall are two, and it's a little bit spread out, although it's still one building, so it's still pretty efficient, pretty compact. It just uses the entire site, both sites. So there really isn't any private development potential here because we're kind of using both the library and the city-owned parcels on this one. So that leads us to site alternative 2, which came out of questions from site alternative 1. How could we still keep the library-owned parcel to the north available for private development so that the proceeds from that sale could help reduce costs on the project? So this one has that advantage where we have about 1.5 acres up there on the top, or 1.3 acres, I think, up on the top. And Bob's going to talk about that later. To really be able to sell off as a private development that would go through, city design guidelines and all that. Wouldn't be exactly part of this project, but would help fund this project. So we wanted to see if we could get this whole thing onto the city-owned parcel. And in order to do that, we basically took the 2-story city hall and placed it up on top of the library, and then put the shared space off as a 1-story element alongside that. So this is essentially a 3-story building, which we think, with the green buffer out front and having it tucked partly into that woodland there, will be just fine for scale. It won't be too imposing, especially when we settle a nice 1-story shared space in front of it and have the public outdoor spaces to kind of mitigate the size of a 3-story building. So this really is a super compact, but we think still works really well if you choose to go this way. The parking gets to be a lot more percentage of the site because we're so compact. So we have a little bit less chance to bring some of those bigger green spaces across, but we still have some chance. We can still blend it. And so let's see what Emily has to say about the site part of this.
Yeah, so as Mike mentioned, the more compact site design has the building and the parking lot taking up a lot of the site. However, there's still the opportunity for a large gathering space that's south facing, that's also facing kind of the city gateway in the front of the building, as you can see in that big orange rectangle. And then there's still an opportunity for a smaller gathering space on the woodland side related to the library and the shared space. And there could be opportunities like alternative one for these play, learn, pause points throughout the buffer. In this scheme, we're shedding the parking lot to 99th and to the center to kind of treat and hold that stormwater and that rainwater. And so because this building is taller, like Mike was suggesting, that on the corner of Market and 99th, we're trying to screen. So you're seeing trees connecting to the buffer behind the building.
And here's that sort of texture drawing of this scheme. So you can kind of see a little bit more of the scale and how it might feel out there a little bit. You know, we haven't studied the architectural expression at this point. We're really looking at site strategies right now. So later we're going to come to you with the preferred alternative and give you a sense of what it might feel to walk up to this building. At this point, we're not at that level. We're really just trying to really look at it from above and understand how it fits on the site. So yeah, as you can see here, that shared space, that kind of bump out on the south, on the lower part of the bar there, that single story space, that could be the big meeting rooms for a city and library. And potentially they could be right next to each other and open onto each other. We think we could do that in the other scheme as well, alternative one. But those rooms can really open out onto that kind of forest outdoor space Emily mentioned on the left, that circular space, or out to the main public plaza on the right. So that really gives us a chance to really open this thing up and make a real flexible combination of space. You can enter this building from the north and the south. So if you come by foot, you might enter from the south, coming off the bus stop there, or by bike. If you're coming by car and you're going to park, you know, most of the parking is up on the north there, so you might want to enter from that north side. So we've looked and contemplated a two-way lobby there, and that gives you some flexibility for entering the building. And then I think that kind of covers it. You know, we're going to shed our stormwater and reveal it as much as possible, so you can kind of see those green kind of moist areas when it's raining, and really give a natural feel to the edges of this site and kind of soften those edges. I should probably cover the scales on that one. I didn't get to that yet, Claire, sorry. This one, again, has really good agency partnerships, so the library and city can really share space here. This is really one building. So if you look down at cost, this one is doing a little bit better, a little bit less cost than the last one because we're sharing more of the building. There's less skin area. There's less roof area. There's one more stop on the elevator, but it's more shared. And so, yeah, this one really has maximized sharing between the two. Does less good on wetland sensitivity, but we still think we can mitigate it. I mean, the issue here is we don't have the library parcel to use for some of that wetland mitigation. So we're gonna have to get creative on how we're gonna mitigate the impacts past that buffer line, that dashed line. But you see some of the green spaces we've placed over on the east side of the building, on the right side, to kind of help potentially take care of some of that. So this one will be a little more challenging for meeting those standards, but we think we can do it. Good, solid exterior public space, not quite as big as it was on alternative 1, which used the library parcel, but still plenty big. I mean, that's a good solid 50 feet from north to south across that public plaza. Still has plenty of room for those little white 10 by 10 tents you can see drawn at the bottom edge there of the public plaza. So that'd be kind of like farmers market day, or I know you have farmers market on the other side, but kind of an arts and crafts fair or some kind of a public gathering where you use those little tents. And then this one has the highest level of potential private development, because we can turn over that whole north site for private development for some proceeds back to the city. Okay, and so that leads us to another completely distinct way of using these two sites, which is completely separating them onto their own parcels. So in alternative 3, the library is built on its own parcel, and the city hall is a 2-story building built on its own parcel. On this one, they're going to be able to share some parking and stormwater infrastructure and face onto each other to kind of flank the two sides of our public outdoor spaces. But otherwise, for all intents and purposes, they're 2 separate buildings, 2 separate mechanical systems, and operate independently from one another.
So even though they're separate buildings, their central gathering space could be shared, and it's quite a big space here that could be pretty dynamic, where we mix in some rain gardens, we mix in some of the site geology, and it's just the same idea of this large gathering space that connects to both of the buildings. We have an opportunity to the north of the library on the woodland side to create that smaller gathering space related to the library programs. And here we still have the idea of screening the corner between 99th and Market, and also the idea of more connected play-learn spaces within the buffer. And because we're using all of the site, there's just more kind of site amenities available to us.
And here it is all kind of stitched together. You can kind of see this is kind of indicating the idea of a mix of public outdoor spaces in between the 2 buildings, stormwater infrastructure, and green space. So it's kind of a blend of all those. You know, the final design will probably look different than this, but the idea is that all 3 of those aspects are mixed in that central public area. You can kind of see how it leads out into the woodland and then feeds people in from the city side on the east side. So it kind of blends a civic space with that green space pretty well between there. You'd be able to see between these buildings into the woodland. That's an aspect of it we thought was pretty great. The dials here, this one has the least amount of agency partnership. It's got some because of shared parking and shared stormwater, on-site stormwater amenity. Wetland sensitivity, this one impacts pretty significantly into the wetland. But again, because we're using both sites, we have plenty of room to mitigate that and replant that buffer area and meet the requirements. Great big exterior public space. This one has some good south-facing sunny side on the kind of north edge of it, where sun would come over the city hall and make it out to that north side. Some of it will be a little bit shady though in the middle of the day, that the shadow cast by the 2-story city hall. So there's a little bit of something we need to work through there to make sure all that space was usable on a sunny day. This one, because it's 2 separate buildings, you know, has a little bit higher cost, a little bit more skin area. They're not sharing as much in terms of mechanical spaces, but like I said, all 3 of these cluster pretty closely on cost, and you'll see that in a little bit. And then this one has really the least amount of private development potential. We think we could carve out some small corners of this, maybe where the buffer is, the green buffer at the south edge, or up in the northeast corner, where we could establish another small retail space or cafe or something like that, but nothing along the lines of a big private development of more housing or something to that extent. So this is a sheet we made that we kind of see as your cheat sheet. When you come in and give us comments on the survey, everybody might want to use this sheet as a great way to really compare these three and really look at them all in one place. So we kind of end our design presentation with this, just to kind of see them all together at one time, and encourage you to do that when you're answering the survey. And please let us really have it in the survey. Tell us what you really think, what you really liked, what you didn't like, and try to be specific. It's really going to be helpful to our team. We don't live there. I mean, I grew up in Woodinville, not too far away, but we don't live there, and we want to hear from you who live there what we should really be doing here to make this just right and fit just right. Yeah, all these scenarios, just to point out, alternatives 1 and 2 contemplate some sharing between the library and City Hall, which we think can make a more dynamic space and save on costs where possible. Alternative 3 really doesn't have that ability. They're two separate buildings operating independently. There's some advantages to that independence and some disadvantages in that we can't share as many of the spaces and cut down on the overall square footage.
Thank you, Mike and Emily. As I mentioned at the start of the presentation, we comprehensively evaluated the various public-private partnership or P3 opportunities, specifically the various delivery approaches to construct a quality project at the lowest possible cost of the public. And we've developed these cost estimates if the project were to be delivered or developed based more on a private sector delivery model than the traditional method of design, bid, build. The private sector model is one that is very collaborative between the developer, the designer, the contractor, and the owner. And its structure allows it to achieve a lower cost. The delivery approach that we believe can achieve these lower costs would be from a progressive design build delivery approach and finance using tax-exempt debt authorized by IRS ruling 6320. Glad to talk more about the various delivery approaches that we've examined if there are questions at the end of this presentation. But this visual showcases each alternative, its hard cost, its soft cost, and really the total development cost. The only cost excluded would be applicable to any of the agencies' independent or own financing costs, which are really premature to identify at this point. But other than that, these are the full cost of a range of costs for alternative 1, alternative 2, and alternative 3. Next slide. So this slide compares that traditional design, bid, build, which is well known in the public sector and used predominantly for public sector projects, particularly projects that are below the ground. We believe that the cost, if you were to take a look at alternative 1, 2, and 3 and go forward with the design, bid, and then build, along with any cost overruns that might be applicable to that sort of method, you'd probably fall within a project cost of 25, 26 million and almost $30 million. And then so the other end of the bookend in terms of cost is what we were calling the P3 delivery approach. And we believe you can achieve significant savings through that delivery approach for a total project cost, depending upon which alternative is selected, between 23 million and 24.4 million. Again, those are full costs. Those are costs identified for 2021. The previous slide had some escalation in terms of cost per square foot, depending upon when the project is built. Next slide. So I mentioned earlier on also that no decision has been made about if and when this project moves forward. A public vote could occur to support the majority of the capital expense associated with the Civic Center project. Recognize that there may be other pots of money that could be pursued in addition to the private sector approach on development on alternative 2 that I mentioned and that Mike detailed. There is a value associated with that library parcel of what we believe to be $900,000 associated with a multifamily development. There's also grant dollars that could be available. Each agency could contribute a certain amount based on its available tax revenue stream that it has today. But likely the bulk of this expense for a new civic center will likely come from a public vote. Again, these are decisions that have not been made yet, but either the city, the library, or the sewer district. And any public vote would not occur before April of 2022 to allow really for sufficient community information and discussion to be disseminated. Next slide. So this is just a recap of sort of our next steps. I mentioned this earlier in the presentation. Of course, our presentation this evening, a public engagement number 2 includes an online survey, and that will be available for the next several weeks until April 22nd after this presentation. And we see the website link there. It's also included on the City of Lake Stevens website. Following the April 22nd public engagement event, we have the entire month of April, or the agencies, the city, the library, and the Lake Stevens Sewer District have the month of April to look at that information provided by the public and then arrive at what might be a preferred concept to further focus on. We'll spend the month of April doing that, finalize some reports and estimates in the last week of May, finish up the environmental review and the conceptual utility plan, refine that preferred concept, whatever that might be, during the last week of May, and then present. The schedule has us presenting the preferred concept the second week of June. And that takes us to the end of our presentation. Thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to present these various concepts. And as Mike had indicated, we're very much looking forward and encourage any public input and your feedback on the design alternatives and concepts, and glad to address any questions that you might have tonight. Russ, we'll turn it back over to you and allow you to field any questions for us. And
thanks for the presentation, everyone. So if anyone in the audience on the other side, if you have a question, if you can just raise your hand in the participant bar, and then the clerk can let you in and ask the question, and we'll try and get those fielded from the appropriate personnel. Also have Chai Ross from the Snow Isle Libraries with us. And we do have a representative from the sewer district also in the audience if any questions do come up related to the sewer district's participation. Okay, I don't see, let's see, a couple of hands it looks like are coming up. One. Are you bringing them over, Teresa?
Yes, Carrie's been promoted to a panelist, so she can ask her question.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Carrie. I just have a quick question. There was no mention of square footage for the buildings on this. So I'm just curious, what would be the different square footages for the buildings?
Yeah, we're looking at the city hall space needs is a little bit north of 18,000. I think it's 18,500. And then we're looking at a range of space sizes for the library and city hall as well, based on how much of this shared space we have. So the library ranges from, I believe it's 14,000 to 18,000, depending on shared uses, roughly. And we'll be able to publish all that along with this. So it's a range on the library based on how much space.
And Mike, for purposes of the cost estimates, we did develop some project square footages for each of the 3 alternatives. And those are on the project cost summary. So they range from 32,000 square feet in total to 34, almost 35,000 square feet total. And that reflects both the library as well as a city hall sewer district offices combined.
Does that cover it for you, Carrie?
Well, I just have another quick question because other libraries within the Snow Isle system are much larger than ours, and considering that Lake Stevens has a higher population, and considering that the survey that was done months ago had a high rate where about 80% of people said that they use the library. I'm just wondering why such a low estimate from 14,000 to 18,000 was considered instead of, per se, 20 to 23,000, which is where the Snohomish Library and the Marysville Library currently sit.
Claire, Mike, I'm not sure if you want to speak more to the space needs analysis that was done for the library in terms of how we arrived at the figures between 14 and 18,000
I
square
can
feet
speak
associated with
to
the
it,
library.
and Shai, feel free to add if I miss anything. But essentially, we looked at a range of square footages for the library. And what we found when we did our program analysis is we compared our library, or the Lake Stevens Library, to a series of peer libraries, one of which you mentioned was Snohomish Library. We also looked at Granite Falls, Mukilteo, and a series of others. And we found that we actually trend pretty similarly in size versus population. You're right that the proposed Lake Stevens Library is indeed smaller than the existing library at Snohomish, which also has a smaller population. But in trying to balance the appropriate ask in terms of cost and size with the same at the same time as looking at what kind of programs we can offer, it was somewhat of a balancing act. So we hope that we addressed that by providing a range within the 16 to 18,000 square foot area that the library can then consider after the conclusion of this phase.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. And I would just add that, while we certainly through our community engagement have gotten a lot of input where the community clearly highly values library services, which requires a high amount of space. We also got a lot of sentiment about saving costs where possible, and therefore we really wanted to explore creative and flexible uses of space that might allow us to balance those two sentiments well. And there's not a decision at this point on what the size of the library would be. We're comfortable at where we're at with the ability to talk about a range of sizes. But Carrie, I would add that the type of feedback you're giving by answering that question remains highly valuable. So please keep it coming as these engagement opportunities arise, including the survey that will go live after this meeting. Thanks.
Okay, are we ready to go on to the next question? I believe Madeline has her hand up.
Madeline's been promoted, so she should be able to ask her question.
I think her mic is still muted.
Let's see.
Madeline, can you unmute your mic?
Okay,
There you
is
go.
it working?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thanks. We live in the area where the Civic Center is going to be built. And our concern is the parking. You're talking about farmers markets and other events, fairs, whatever, outdoor. Parking is really at a premium. Since the homes over here were built, the newer ones, they're parking on 99th Street. With what you're showing now, I could see everyday use, but if you have any big social events, anything that would bring in crowds, you're just not going to have it. You're going to end up taking over parking at Target, at the doctor's offices. And the streets here can't handle all the overflow of parking. That's my main concern. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, we had Mary and then Sue.
Mary's been added.
Mary, can you unmute yourself? There you go. Thank you.
So I just wanted to say that what a wonderful presentation, and that I think we have great potential. The current library, well, while it's still standing, is 2,500 square feet. So let's keep that in mind when we think about the next size of a library. The parking is absolutely an issue. I have to agree with the last person that spoke, because I know I'm very familiar with that neighborhood and I do understand what you're saying. Thank you to the Stowe developers for all the hard work you've done to reach out to our community, and don't forget to take care of the rock, just gotta say. Thank you.
Okay, then Sue Fernald would be next.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can, Sue.
Okay, good evening. As most of the people listening probably know, the library bond has not been passed the last 2 times. I'm concerned this time because I would like to see a new library as I have grandkids. But my concern is you have 3 entities here. You have the city, you have the library, and you have the sewer. They all have their own taxing base. For this to pass, would each one of them have to be okayed on the bond? Or would this be divided on those 3 monthly bills by the square footage? That is my question.
Just to make a general response, and others can, each agency can also fill in, but there's no decisions been made yet on how this project might get financed. Certainly it becomes much easier to finance a project and move forward with a project if it were a single ballot measure. But that doesn't mean a project couldn't go forward with multiple ballot measures. They would just all need to be coordinated, and as well as any fundraising activities that would need to occur. But again, since no decision has been made yet on how the project gets financed or when it gets financed, those are issues that haven't been tackled yet and will certainly be discussed by the city and the Snow Isle as well as the sewer district. And just one more comment. At this point, the assumption has been made that the Lake Stevens sewer district would likely be a tenant and not necessarily financed through a bond issuance, unless for whatever reason their lease they would be paying to the city of Lake Stevens or such that it would need to have that additional revenue stream. But again, none of that's been decided yet. So those matters haven't been tackled yet by our team.
Just to add on just briefly, Bob's absolutely correct. As we've been going through the discussions, we've been talking about all sorts of models for financing. That's one of the big reasons that we're going to start the community campaign over the next few months before even considering taking it to a ballot. So over the next few months, we should be able to iron out all of those details and the cost sharing, and if there are multiple ballot measures, a singular one. So yeah, we'll be working towards those decisions over the next few months. I don't see any other hands up in the group. Again, if you do have a question for the panel, if you can just please raise your digital hand and then we will move you over. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so I would like to first thank the panel for their great presentation tonight, and thank all of you for your participation, your questions, and the survey will be on the city's website tomorrow. pass it along through your various channels so we can get a lot of great feedback on this project. And as you saw in the slideshow earlier, we will have some follow-up information in the future, and the city is maintaining a website that will provide project information. Hand it over to the panel or to Snow Isle if there are any last comments that you'd like to make tonight. Thank you again.
Thank you, Russ.
Thanks, Russ. On the Snow Island, we're just looking forward to hearing the input from the community from here.
All right, I guess we'll sign off. So again, thank you, and please have your friends and family fill out the survey. Good night, all.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night. Thank you.